Good evening. I'd like to call our regular council meeting for Monday, November 22nd to order at 6 p.m. Good evening to colleagues on council. All of us are in the chamber this evening. Good evening to members of staff who are both in the chamber and will be participating via Zoom. And good evening to members of the public watching the live webcast or watching a recording of the meeting at a later time. I'd like to acknowledge with respect we are holding our meeting this evening in the territory of the Miscellaneous Nation. And I'll turn to approval of the agenda. I have five additions and one change, or two changes. Three additions and two changes. The first is we have an additional, we have a letter from the Pickleball Association under item 13C, the staff report. We have an additional item of correspondence from the Vancouver Island South Film Commission that will go under 14C. We have Councillor Wainwright's notice of motion as 16A. And the two changes are, we have a presentation coming up shortly from the BIA, and that is the letter from the BIA is on the latter part of our agenda under correspondence, and I would like to move that up to right after that presentation. And lastly, we have a letter of correspondence, item 15.4, which is a letter from a resident, Mr. Paquette. It indicates that staff are going to be providing a response. It was a recently received letter, but that response has not been included, so we will just withdraw that from the agenda this evening and will come back to us when that's available. And with those, I would like to seek a motion to approve, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any all in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to public participation. We have no registered speakers via Zoom for public participation or members in the chamber, or members of the public in the chamber. So we will move on to a presentation, and I'd like to confirm connection of Ms. Morgan Shaw, Executive Director of the BIA, is connected.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Are you
Ms.
able
Shaw.
to hear me all right?
I am. I'll just introduce you for a moment. Ms. Shaw is here as Executive Director of the Sidney Business Improvement Area Society with a presentation with regards to the BIA bylaw renewal. The floor is yours for 10 minutes, and we'd be pleased if you would perhaps take questions if Council has any at the end of your presentation.
Of course. Thank you so much. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Part of my work here is done in my introduction, but happy to be here in presentation form tonight. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Sidney BIA and following a unanimous vote in favor, I am very pleased to present our official request of Council to approve the Sidney BIA bylaw renewal for a new 5-year term effective 2023. Since our formation in 2013, the Society has worked diligently in collaboration with stakeholders and local community organizations to make a positive difference in the area following the Society's mandate, which is to increase footsteps, potential customers, clients, and event attendees in all sectors within the BIA district. And this happens through the development, implementation, and evaluation of marketing, promotion, communication, and collaborative efforts. The letter of request associated with my presentation this evening outlines a fairly broad sweep of the many benchmarks that the Sidney BIA has accomplished to date, but I wanted to take a couple of minutes to highlight some important metrics that we believe represent important value to Sydney's business community and surrounding neighborhoods. Since 2013, the Sidney BIA has worked hard to advocate and secure over $533,000 in sponsorship from local TV and radio stations for community events in Sidney. Without question, the world has become more and more digitized since the Society's formation in 2013. And with this, the Sidney BIA board has reacted progressively in ensuring a top-of-the-line digital experience, including website, social media, and so on, for those both operating in Sidney as a business and those looking to visit or relocate. So with these advances, the Sidney BIA has recorded over 1 million site views to exploresydney.ca since its inception in 2013. This has resulted in increased exposure and economic impact to the community. These site visits are driven through targeted marketing and digital campaigns in both short and long haul markets, 365 days per year. So it really opens up the span of what we can accomplish because we can be running multiple campaigns or promotions to direct traffic to Sidney and really get them hyper-located. So we've been working hard to accomplish that, and it continues to pay off, which is fantastic. But we all know that print is not dead. We continue to receive requests and options for inclusion of popular Sidney guides, fold-out maps, and affiliated print material through the BIA. Through contracts with BC Ferries, the Victoria Airport Authority, Coho Ferries, Washington State Department of Transportation, Destination Greater Victoria, and Destination British Columbia, the Sidney BIA ensures that information about Sidney is served throughout all point of entry locations and beyond by way of over 100,000 printed guides to date. And we just placed another order as we move into 2022. The Sidney BIA is proud to work on behalf of our 350 plus stakeholders and look forward to continuing to foster an inclusive and strong local economy for our area. As I conclude this evening, I speak on behalf of the Sidney BIA Board of Directors and staff when I extend a great thanks to the town of Sidney, both council and staff. The collaboration and support that we continue to receive over the past 9 years has been exponential and is deeply valued. Thank you again, and I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Morgan, for your presentation. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thanks. Hi, Morgan. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering, when was the last time that the SBIA had to go out to businesses to sort of make the pitch for the SBIA levy? Was that 9 or 10 years ago, or was it before then? I need a little history lesson on that.
2017, so we're running in 5-year terms at the moment, and that's what our request is as well.
And I don't know if it's a question for you or for staff in terms of what does the alternate process look like?
Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The process is that the property owners within the BIA area would be given the opportunity to indicate their opposition to the renewal, and in order to defeat it, they would require 50% of the owners representing at least 50% of the property values in the area to object to it.
Okay, and follow up, if I may, through you to staff. And so does the town take care of that process, or is that the BIA that does that?
It's a town process. So
Okay.
there would be a bylaw brought forward with all the details surrounding the BIA, and from what I understand, there aren't going to be any changes proposed this time around, other than the levy amount will be refreshed. So the bylaw will receive 3 readings, and then we'll go through the approval process.
Okay, and one just to follow up on that. So in terms of the amount, so with the increased amount would be communicated to the business owners when that notification went out, so they would know what the increase was going to be, I presume?
That's right, and I don't wish to speak for Ms. Shaw, but the current bylaw has 2.5% annual increments, and we expect the renewed bylaw to be at the same level.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, thank you again, Morgan Shaw. Congratulations on the success over the last 10 years, and we look forward to seeing the process unfold for the third 5-year renewal, third 5-year term. Morgan, we have moved up on our agenda, actually, council deliberating on your letter and passing a motion. So if you'd like to disconnect your video and mute, you could certainly watch us as we proceed to that rather than going to it later in the agenda. And with that, I would turn to that item on our agenda. Councillor Wainwright.
I'll move that the request for a 5-year renewal using the same alternate approval process as the last renewal be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, and it stems partly from last week's presentation by the business owner at 2227 James White Boulevard, and hopefully, Ms. Shaw is listening. I had concerns when I hear a business owner saying that they don't feel like they're getting value from the SBIA, which that proponent had presented that evening. And I've also heard that from at least one other business owner in the community. So it's just something that just to keep in mind. I know we have this process where they can say they're not in favor of the changes through the bylaw procedure, but it's just something that the SBIA might want to be aware of. That there are, there's some people that feel like they're not being served appropriately. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Similar comments. Again, I was thinking of the business owner last week, and I've heard from other business owners as well. I think SBIA has done some amazing things for the town, but there's a number of business owners that I've heard from that don't feel like they're getting value. So it would be nice if there was a way to do a bit more to support those business owners. I was a little bit apprehensive about approving this, just because it's been almost 10 years since the SBIA, it sounds like, went out to the business owners to kind of make their pitch as to why this should be approved. But in hearing how the process works with staff, it sounds like those people who don't feel like they're getting value or have concerns, that they'll be able to respond. So knowing that, I'm happy to support the motion for the alternate process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll next move to bylaws, and the first under item 5A is bylaw number 2220, miscellaneous fees and charges, bylaw amendment number 20. Council considered this on October 12th, and we approved an increase in the cost of monthly parking passes from $40 to $50, and this amendment would be required to proceed with that, and we can, by way of 3 motions, begin that process tonight.
I'll move first reading.
Renewal?
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm in favor of the increase. I guess my only comment is that I think this is still really cheap, $50 a month for parking. And, at the SIP conference today, we were talking about sustainable economy and environment, and about, making it more attractive for people to not use their cars. And so I guess what I'd like to see is, once we've also talked about doing a broader review of downtown parking. So at some point, I'd like us to revisit that amount in the future. But for now, I'll support the motion as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Motion carries.
Move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And that will come to a future meeting for adoption. I'll move to item 5B, which is bylaw number 2221, business license bylaw, and amendment number 2. And at a previous meeting on October 25th, Council resolved to waive business license fees for 2022. And we have motions we can proceed with this evening.
I'll move first reading.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed or opposed? One opposed. Motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So I have concerns about waiving these. I articulated some of those last week. But what made me think about pondering them again is later in the agenda today, we're looking at the report to award the RFP for the economic development strategy. And so one of the things that popped out from me in that report was that the budget that we've allocated will cover the cost of the consultant and some money to help us out with that. But after that, we're going to need some money to fund the initiatives that fall out of what I believe is a 5-year plan. And so I guess what my concerns are is that we're going to go through this process to develop an economic development strategy, which is important, and not having the money to fund the initiatives that come out of that. And so what I would propose is that we continue to collect the business license fees, and that we would put that into economic development fund, or at least part of it, to fund some of those initiatives. We talked about last week about the fact that the amount of the business license fees to each individual owner is really not that significant, ranging anywhere, I think, from $50 to home business up to $200. But so I don't think it's going to have a significant impact one way or the other on any significant, in any significant way. I think Councillor Duncan mentioned it was mainly just almost like a token or a symbolic gesture. And I think our business community needs more than symbolic gestures from us. And so my inclination would be to continue to collect the business license fees and to use those monies to support economic development initiatives that would support the business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I still think it's a reasonable idea to waive the business license fee. And if I think of things like this economic development strategy, one of the things that comes to mind to me is the question of who should pay for it. Like, is this being done for the community as a whole, or is this being done purely for the benefit of the business community? If it is for the benefit of the community as a whole, we should probably fund it out of general tax revenue and not expect to fund it off the businesses over something specific like a business license fee. And I do believe that the economic development strategy is for the community as a whole, not specifically for the businesses. And I don't think we should be looking at the businesses as the primary funder. And I'd remind us all that even if we do it from the general tax revenue, the business community tends to pay 3 times the rate that residential does anyway. So even if it's coming from the general tax revenue, it is still primarily on the backs of business. And anyway, I think that's I still think it's reasonable to waive the business license fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I turn to Councillor Rentoul, and then Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm still comfortable with the amendment as proposed. I think one of the reasons being, thinking back to the staff report that was the catalyst for this discussion, was that piece around this process we currently have is not revenue neutral. We don't recoup enough funds as a part of that process, and so really the catalyst, I think, from council as part of that same discussion, subsequent motion, was to look to staff to give consideration to eliminating business license fees in perpetuity. And so I really think that we continue down that path. I mean, we're really addressing this as sort of a 1 year, giving ourselves further time to assess that option, similar to the municipality of Langford has with respect to business licensing. I see it as probably being more efficient for the staff, for the town, and for businesses, frankly, if we had that direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Mayor. I had originally, of course, objected to this when it came around the first time, as Councillor O'Keefe acknowledged. However, and then I changed my vote when we actually came to vote for it, based on Councillor Wainwright's argument that, you know, I had said it was a token gesture that was based on our COVID response, and it was implemented at the time as a COVID response, but with the background that this was something that we could consider, because, as I think it was Councillor Fallett who pulled it out before, and Councillor Renewal just mentioned, it's not a revenue neutral thing, and so it's not like we would be generating excess funds that we would be able to direct to other economic activities anyway. It's not necessarily paying for itself, and being able to look at it as to evaluate doing a permanent business license later and waiving those fees. I'm comfortable again with this, waiving it for another year, as long as it was not being continued as a COVID measure, and more as an examination of whether this is something that we can do as a town, and still raise the funding we need and be better able to, I guess, meet the needs of business licensing on a business by business basis. That if the fees that are mostly being required annually are things like fire inspections and things that really vary from business to business, I would rather us examine that, and if the town can get by without this pot of money, based on, you know, the $100 per business isn't really covering what we need anyway, I'm comfortable exploring that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fallon?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't support this motion, and I won't be supporting it this evening either. I recognize the arguments, recognize that it isn't revenue neutral, as I had spoken to previous, and there are efficiencies that are being done in the staff. But I think right now we should carry on and collect the business license until we make a business decision of what we're going to do in regards to that. COVID has turned our world upside down, and the weather events of last week have done even more so. And I think to withdraw the fees for this at this point, for, in essence, it's another COVID measure, is not the right reasoning for it, and I think we need to take this in a much more business-like fashion. I will not support the motion to withdraw it at this time. I think we need to continue it, and we need to look at the whole picture and look at it in the vein of how do we best provide the services to our community in the most efficient manner and the most cost-effective manner. If it means at the end that we don't collect business license, we have perpetual business license, then I will probably support it at that time. Right now, I'm not comfortable supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. And I didn't support this last time, and I won't support it again. And although I do support the idea of supporting our lots of supports here, but of our local businesses, but as has been stated, it's not a tremendous help. It's something which is, you know, we want to support them, and I'm all for that. I'm also for the perpetual business license program and investigating that and see if that's what we want to have going forward. My concern is the approximately, I believe staff said $85,000 shortfall, not just for potential things, as Councillor O'Keefe spoke to, in terms of things we can help with after the development strategy comes out, but leaving our budget short when, by all accounts, we're going to be in for a tough year in just a couple of months. So for those reasons, I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a question through to staff. Would the business license revenue be made up by COVID restart funds in 2022?
That is the plan for 2022, but this will be the last year that we're proposing to do that.
Okay, thank you. I concur with the colleagues who spoke in favor, and I spoke last time on a number of points, and I won't repeat those this evening, but I remain in support of this, and seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Fallett, Councillor Garnett. The motion carries. Thank you.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? 3 opposed. Councillor Keith, Councillor Fallot, Councillor Garnett, the motion carries. Thank you. We'll next move to adoption of our minutes from the regular council meeting of November 8th.
Move adoption?
Second.
Any errors, omissions, or comments? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn from Mayor's report and Councillor's report. We only have a Councillor's report this evening from Councillor Renewal, our council representative that serves as the director on the CREST board. I'll turn to Councillor Renewal.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to address a recent media release which was picked up in the Times Colonist and by other press with respect to CREST moving forward as identified in its strategic plan in the development of a post-disaster building to house all of its infrastructure personnel, as well as the technical side of the operations in a new building. CREST has secured a site for that building and is currently working through the process of design, anticipated to be an approximately $16 million building to house CREST and its infrastructure. The approval process in relation to shareholders, so that includes municipalities and other users of the infrastructure, would be by way of a special meeting of the board to address this and require support to move forward with this from its shareholder representatives. So as the town's nominee to the CREST board, I would vote as a director in CREST on this with the authorization through the town. That process, I anticipate, will come before council at a future date and likely involve a suggested format by CREST for its approval. I think most importantly, we've certainly seen in very recent weeks, including late October as well as mid-November, I think very poignant reasons to move our emergency communication infrastructure into a suitable facility for post-disaster response, not only to protect its technical infrastructure, but also its technicians and the people that operate that system. And what I think is likely to be seen as this moves forward is that CREST fully intends to finance this through funding through the MFA, Municipal Finance Authority, and also to do so in terms of its repayment structure within the confines of the current shareholder agreement, which would mean, not looking to municipalities to assess a special levy, anything of that nature, but to fund it through that loan and fund it through the increases annually that are permitted within the confines of the current shareholder agreement. So I'll leave my introduction to this at that point, Mayor, and would anticipate that we'll hear from CREST looking for support at a future date prior to the special general meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rentoul. Are there any questions from Councillor? Councillor O'Keefe?
Through you to Councillor Rentoul. Yeah, this is a good idea. I'm just wondering in terms of costs that we might plan for, and you covered some of it with they're going to the MFA to get funding. What I'm wondering also is about the $24.5 million upgrade to the P25. Has that been paid? Was that via a loan or additional levy, and is that still to be paid, or?
Yeah,
You know,
so
or-
with respect to P25 and those infrastructure enhancements that took place, that was through an MFA loan, which was amortized over 10 years. So there's still a number of years remaining on that repayment structure. And that particular system, and Chief Mickelson may comment better than myself on this, but by my recollection, it's been operating, including being used by both the Sidney Fire and the RCMP for approximately 2 years now. So it is up and running. That infrastructure is working throughout the CREST operation area.
What more, if I may? And I'm just wondering about long-term operating costs, whether, because they're consolidating operations in one building from several, whether they anticipating perhaps lower operating costs, or would it be more operating costs because they've got, I don't know, higher end equipment or things in there? Just wondering.
Yeah, I would not anticipate that this would lead to lower operational costs. Obviously, the shareholder agreement and the latitude that's in there to increase user fees on a small percentage basis annually would help address the lending and the capacity there. But I don't anticipate that you'll see a change operation, in part because new technology and the specialization that's required to upkeep it and maintain it, aside from that capital costs of continuously refreshing it, those costs I wouldn't anticipate are going to go down in the foreseeable future. So from an operational standpoint, I wouldn't anticipate this consolidation leads to any cost reductions for users. The user pay system is fairly complex. It depends on the geographic area. It depends on the number of radios in that area. It depends on the number of transmissions, the calls, the talk time on those radios. And so I feel like we should expect that obviously the terms of the shareholder agreement and the incremental increases would continue throughout the term of that agreement.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Would ask for a motion to receive for information.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to committee reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, our liaison to the Economic Advisory Committee.
I'll move that the minutes of November 4th be received.
Second.
Any comment, sir? Councillor Wainwright?
No, nothing in particular.
Call the question, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright again as one of our council representatives to the OCP Review Advisory Committee.
I'll move that the minutes of November 4th be received.
Second.
Call the question, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
There's one recommendation in the minutes, and it's actually that the discussion points from the committee's meeting be received, but it would make more sense to actually refer them to the OCP team for consideration rather than simply receive them. So I'll move that the discussion points from the OCP Review Advisory Committee's meeting of November 4th, 2021 regarding the feedback on the OCP Key Directions report be referred to the OCP team for consideration.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes, through you, a question, Councillor Wainwright. So are you you're not talking about referring it back to the advisory committee? When you say the OCP team, does that mean staff? Or
Yes, it means staff and the consultant.
Oh, okay. And so I guess in terms of, their question, their motion was about giving these to council. So obviously staff would include that in whatever comes back to us, and then we would be considering their points at that time, I guess is what would happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their points have come to us actually in the minutes, and now it's a question of what do we want to do with that.
Okay.
And we should give it to the OCP team for them to consider it and build it in to the OCP.
Got you. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. Turn to Councillor O'Keefe, who was chair of our Committee of the Whole meeting last week.
Thank you. I'll move that the minutes be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Or received, sorry, thank you. I move that the minutes be received. You got it. Okay.
Moved and
Second.
seconded, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries, and we have two recommendations.
Yes, the committee recommended, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 2227 James White Boulevard be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 1001000313 to allow dwelling units to be located on the ground floor of the building and within the same story as a non-residential use, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
And there's a second recommendation from the committee, and I'll move that zoning amendment application number RZ 100103 at 10228 Almond Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second?
Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. We'll go to item 12D, and I'll turn to Councillor Renewal, our liaison to the Advisory Planning Commission.
Move receipt of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
Move the recommendation from the Advisory Planning Commission that the development permit application number DP 100825 at 2313 Orchard Avenue to permit the construction of 2 small lot single-family dwellings be brought before council for consideration of approval, and 2, that as conditions of approval of development permit application number DP 100825, the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit A, register a flood hazard covenant on the title of the property referencing the submitted engineer's report, and B, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor Renewal?
Thank you. I'll just point out to council that there was, as noted in the record of decision, a fair amount of discussion around the flood hazard covenant itself, as well as the FCL in this case, with one member of the committee being quite uncomfortable with the building practice of building habitable residence space beneath the FCL, and so that was quite a discussion. Having said that, the APC supported this application in terms of it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Oh, I'll turn to Corporate Officer Ms. Nelson.
Hi there. Just wanted to point out, just reading the recommendation from the Advisory Planning Commission, it says that that it be brought before council for consideration of approval. I guess this is the time that it's being brought forward for approval. So the wording would mean that council approve the development permit application. There's no notice that goes out to anyone, so this is when the council has the opportunity to approve it. Just want to clarify that wording there.
So would you like to confirm rewording, Councillor Renewal?
Thank you. So the first part of the motion should read that development permit application number DP 100825 at 2313 Orchard Avenue to permit the construction of 2 small lot single-family dwellings be approved, and 2 without further change.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. We'll next turn to our staff reports, and under 13A, we have a selection of a consultant regarding the economic development strategy, and I'll turn to Mr. Humble for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the intent of this staff report is to bring forward for council's consideration a recommendation regarding the preferred consultant to complete an economic development strategy for the town. As noted in the staff report, the town received 4 submissions in response to an RFP that was issued by our working partner on this project, the South Island Prosperity Partnership. An RFP submission review working group was established with representation from senior staff at the town, SIP, as well as a representative of the town's Economic Advisory Committee. The working group reviewed the submissions and have determined that based upon the selection criteria that's laid out in the RFP document, that Lionsgate Consulting scored the highest of the 4 submissions. The report provides additional information on their submission, which came in under the $60,000 allocated budget that has previously been approved by council. The staff recommendation is that council approve the selection of Lionsgate Consulting as the consulting firm that will complete the town's economic development strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion, a recommendation.
I'll move that council approve the selection of Lionsgate Consulting, Inc. as the consulting firm to complete the town's economic development strategy.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I just want to comment that I think this is an excellent recommendation. I look at the package. I'm really happy with the background and experience of this consultant. I noted that they worked with Cranbrook and Esquimalt, which I had reviewed their plans in the past, which I thought were good. I really liked their proposed approach, the type and amount of engagement that they're doing. I really like that there's a performance measurement framework proposed as well, and that the timeline is really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this rolls out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to item 13B, which is Downtown Streetscape and Urban Design Standards Implementation. We have a report from staff. I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb for an introduction, please. Good evening, Mr. Newcomb.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is a follow-on to my November 1st presentation to Committee of the Whole. As Council's aware, the Streetscape document dates back to 2018. And the current document was finalized in January of 2018. And as a follow-up to the resolution to finalize the document, Council also passed a resolution to have it presented at a future Committee of the Whole meeting to discuss implementation. So that was what I was covering a little bit of at the November 1st presentation, a little bit about implementation and what that might look like, how staff have been approaching implementation to this point. In summary, basically what we're looking at and what we're already doing is looking at incorporating the Streetscape document into the town's OCP. So the first section that deals with the urban design principles and any other relevant sections would be incorporated into the town's OCP going forward. And what staff is proposing is to continue that process with other relevant town bylaws. So with the zoning bylaw, and most specifically with the subdivision and development bylaw, which does include a large number of sort of relevant street standards for the town. So that's the proposed approach going forward, and the idea would be that as each of these bylaws is updated, staff would bring forward a very detailed package of the bylaw amendments that would include the relevant pieces from the standards document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Any questions from colleagues? Seeing none, we have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that staff bring forward amendments to the appropriate town of Sidney and land use and development bylaws that allow for the incorporation and implementation of the downtown streetscape and urban design standards.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, and we'll turn to item 13C, which is pickleball courts in residential areas. So a report from staff, and I'll turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please. Good evening, Ms. Clary.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this report is about pickleball courts. The staff are working on an engagement plan for 3 pickleball court locations or potential locations at Tallista Park, Iroquois Park, and Breathitt Park. And as we were working on the plan, we learned that the District of Saanich actually came out with some guidelines outlining where pickleball courts may be suitable with respect to residential properties. So we looked at those guidelines, and it's hard to find a spot in Sidney where pickleball courts wouldn't require noise mitigation. In fact, there's really no locations that wouldn't require noise mitigation. So that was some good new information for staff to consider. And also the District of Saanich is doing a pilot project right now with a new sound attenuation panel So it would be really great to hear how that works out before we move forward with engagement and select a location. So the recommendation is that we postpone engagement until we do hear how that trial is happening at Tomley Park, and also to approach the Saanich Peninsula Recreation Commission requesting that they explore the possibility of pickleball in one of their facilities or add on to a facility. They're better equipped to have a facility than the town of Sidney because we don't have any existing recreation centers.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Just out of curiosity, because we got a letter that came in from a resident, and they said that they had approached the Recreation Commission to know forward progress. So, is there something that it would indicate that as the town of Sidney we might have a little more pull or a little more impetus to help that along in any way?
Mr. Humble or Mr. Hissack may be in a better position to answer this, but my understanding is that we might hold a bit more weight because it is made up of the 3 municipalities, Central Saanich, North Saanich, and Sidney.
All we can do is ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, I have perhaps one or two. And the first is with regards to the sound attenuation panels. There are different levels of sound attenuation panels. In the staff report, it describes one particular one that has to rise, that is a solid and rises to 8 feet and presents challenges. Sorry, Ms. Clary, are there different sound attenuation
Oh, sorry. Yes.
strategies?
Yes. So actually, the Saanich Peninsula Pickleball Association did provide some options for sound mitigation. It was a combination of berms, and it's a fence called AcoustiFence, and that is currently what's installed at Tomley Park in the district of Saanich. They're still clearly having issues there. So Saanich, is my understanding from their staff report, I haven't actually called anyone there since reviewing their staff report, is that they have a new panel, and it sounds like they have 2 of these panels, a sound attenuation panel that they were going to pilot and consider installing more of if they seem to be successful.
And what do we understand the length of the pilot to be in Saanich?
I'm not sure at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Renewal?
Thank you, Mayor. Through to staff, with respect to the letter that was received late from the Pickleball Association, one of the suggestions in that letter was consideration of Rotary Park as an option for the construction of pickleball courts. Can you comment as to whether or not any consideration or discussion has occurred with regard to that as a potential location?
Yes, I can through to Councillor Renewal. We have approached the airport about looking at locations on their property. They haven't provided any locations that might be suitable. They haven't really entertained the idea. And the Rotary Park is technically on the airport property, so there's not a ton of space there at this point that's not being used up by the baseball folks.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just further considering Rotary Park specifically as a location, and I only say that because of the parking infrastructure that's already there, the seasonal use of that location, and the fact that there are facilities, including washrooms, on that site. And I can't help but wonder if there isn't an opportunity to partner not just with the airport on this, but with Peninsula Baseball and Softball Association. My question to staff, and perhaps more to the CAO, might be, there is a committee in which the town liaises with Peninsula Baseball and Soccer Association. Also opportunities to liaise with the airport authority. Could that committee that I referred to be a vehicle to enter some dialogue, because I believe that lease, the agreement between the town and PBSA is likely due to be renewed in 2022.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Renewal. So that's I believe it's the Joint Operating Committee. I'd have to look at the terms of reference specifically associated with that particular committee, because I'm not sure if it would cover this particular aspect, to be quite honest. Of course, the other key player in all of this, if we're talking about Rotary Park, is the District of North Saanich, because it's their municipality as well. So we would certainly want to engage them if we're having any discussions, I think, with the Airport Authority regarding the potential of additional pickleball courts within their municipal boundary.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question through to staff, to Councillor Renewal's question. That committee, softball committee, consists of the town of Sidney and North Saanich. Does it include the Airport Authority?
No, it does not.
Okay. Thank you. I have one additional question, if Ms. Clary is still available. And that is, Ms. Clary, can you hear my question? Okay.
Sorry, it is challenging to hear you right now, but I'm listening.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my question is, evidently, Saanich has done a fair bit of work in this to come up with the recommendations, some research. Would it have included decibel levels that are acceptable at various distances? The report or the appended information from North Saanich refers to different distances, but would decibel levels have been part of the specifications or recommendations?
Through to the mayor. So the Saanich's recommendation is about distancing and the different engineering required. So basically anywhere in Sidney would require sound engineering, which would look at decibel readings, but they do, in their report, they talk about decibel readings not being everything. It's more about the consistent sound that's made. The decibel readings, and the Saanich Peninsula Pickleball Association did provide decibel readings from Wayne Road, which was helpful, but we still hear of lots of noise complaints from residents in the area. So unfortunately, for pickleball in particular, it's not just the decibel reading, it's the consistency of the noise that's being generated.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor Renewal?
Thank you. And just to close the loop on the Rotary Park dialogue, I concur with Ms. Clary's assessment that the park is, in terms of the space, is well utilized. I don't know the exact delineation of the lease area from the Airport Authority. There's some space certainly to the north of the existing hard surface parking area where vehicles often park that appears to be underutilized at certain times of day. So I just can't help but wonder if there is an opportunities we could explore there, and I might be inclined to revise the recommendation that's before us in that sense. My next comment, however, is with respect to the suggestion that the town write a letter to the PRC. I'll just acknowledge that the Recreation Commission is in the midst of renewing its strategic plan. And of course, there is input from community users, including Pickleball Association and pickleball players, that I think the Recreation Commission will be considering. So that opportunity to have that discussion likely exists through commissioners, such as myself, the mayor, as well as our citizen appointment, to have that dialogue, from the town's perspective. Short of writing the letter that's suggested here. And so my question to staff is, would that sort of satisfy the second element of this recommendation if we weren't to, send this formal request to the Recreation Commission, but to engage through commissioners at the strategic plan level?
Yes, I think that would satisfy the second part of the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one last question that's come to mind, and that is, I was thinking back to previous presentations from the Pickleball Association to council. And one of them was their use at what was, I think, arrangements that were made in the previous council term, whereby the association does use the multi-sport court in Iroquois Park. And there's actually a net there that they can take out. And then they also use one of the two courts. I think there was marking in the tennis courts. I don't recall through correspondence us receiving a complaint in those two locations during our council term. I appreciate that this question might have been better asked of staff earlier, but is staff aware of complaints at that usage at that level in the past?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ms. Clary is aware of any complaints. I'm not aware of any complaints being received from folks in the area. I'm not sure how much in particular the multi-sport court is actually utilized by pickleball players, because I'm not sure if it gets a lot of use, but again, Ms. Clary may have perspective on that as well.
Sure, thank you, through to the mayor. So we haven't received any noise complaints. We think that it's because of the mixed use that there is there. It's not constantly pickleball all day, every day, and there's only one court per location. They are spread out a little bit. The multi-sport court is used for pickleball. We actually recently replaced the net because someone realized that it had gone missing. So they are used, but I think the difference is that it's not consistent pickleball. It's a mixed use instead of just the one sport.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions from staff, we have recommendations.
I'd like to move an alteration to the recommendation that pickleball engagement be postponed while staff further consider Rotary Park as an option for future pickleball courts in consultation with the Victoria Airport Authority, District of North Saanich, and the Peninsula Baseball and Softball Association.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Renewal.
Yeah, thank you. I think this does give pause for thought, the reference to the postponement, which doesn't prohibit staff from getting further feedback from the Saanich initiatives, but also addresses the suggestion from the Pickleball Association that we give some further formal consideration to Rotary Park as an option. Thank you.
I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, if colleagues might remember, I actually suggested airport lands when this first came, just because it's not near anybody, and it's a tricky thing trying to establish a balance between the pickleball users who are trying to advance physical fitness and health and well-being against people in our community having the right to peace and quiet in their homes. And it is a loud sport, having visited Wayne Road, and one thing that factors in outside of decibels is level of play. And fortunate enough, when I was there, we had people that were beginner. I watched people who were beginners and people who were obviously very experienced. So the sound levels vary dramatically. The people that are very experienced, it's a constant noise because they're hitting the ball hard and they're hitting it often, as opposed to people who are just lobbing it over, just having fun, getting exercise. So things to consider. But I appreciate Councillor Rentoul's an attempt at a bit of a compromise here, and hopefully we'll be able to get all parties on board. There is, I think, a bit of a space there that we might be able to put something in if it's, and I know the area you're speaking of that tends to be parking when there's a tournament, and other than that, it tends not to be used. So, I mean, there is the potentiality for something there. So, I'll definitely support what you put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm not in support of this for a couple reasons. First of all, Rotary Park is not in our municipality. And so I feel like it's a bit, I think we're stepping outside of, we're stepping over the line to be suggesting to North Saanich, which is already having issues with pickleball in their community, for the town of Sidney to be, suggesting that North Saanich, that we would look into this, for one thing. So in terms of foisting that upon them, and in terms of our staff spending additional time on looking at something that is not within our community. So I have an issue with that. I think our staff have done an enormous amount of work on this. In preparation for this, going back and looking at the various reports, I think staff have spent a huge amount of time on this, looking for ways that we can, where we could do this. Can we take mitigation measures? So I'm quite satisfied that, that the town of Sidney and the staff have put forward their best effort in trying to accommodate this somewhere. I think that, perhaps there's some space at Rotary Park, and if that's the case, I would encourage the Pickleball Association, go make that pitch to North Saanich, because that's, and let them consider that. But in terms of our staff, directing our staff to take the lead on something that is not within our municipality, that's where I have a bit of an issue. So I'm more inclined to support the initial motion that was provided by staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll speak for just a moment on a couple of points. One is I support the motion. I think we should. I think it's a reasonable. I think it's a reasonable way to move this forward. I'm concerned that we postpone for an unknown period of time, not knowing the length of time that the signage pilot might take. I appreciate the work and the research that staff have done to bring this information and the recommendation forward. One of the things of note in the letter from the Pickleball Association that we received today was the point that facilities spread out, or less pickleball courts in one space, will generate less noise, and that's what made me think back to the fact that pickleball is played on one court of our tennis court in Iroquois Park. It is played in the multi-sport court and we haven't had complaints. And so I do appreciate that the Pickleball Association, in one of their requests to us at an earlier date, requested that we turn the entire Iroquois Park tennis facilities into pickleball, and I could see that if you were to put 6 courts there, would likely generate the same challenges that we've seen with 6 courts in 4 or 6 courts in North Saanich. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that we expand in Iroquois Park to additional courts. I would leave in place what we have there, but we did have some discussion with regards to Tallista Park, and staff does make reference to it from the previous deliberation at council with regards to Tallista Park as a location. My question with regards to decibels was in regards to having spent, I spent a reasonable amount of time in Tallista Park, and there is fairly heavy traffic on a fairly continuous basis on 5th Street on Lochside Drive, and to me it's a bit of a sound barrier between Tallista Park and the residential neighborhood. Staff make the important note that a 4-story multifamily is recently been approved, and that sound does apparently go up, and so that could have an impact. But and I realize from the staff's information this evening that that decibels on its own is not a sufficient indicator. But I think if you were to put 1 court or 2 courts in Tallista Park, you're not 1 court is not any different than 1 court at Iroquois Park or the multi-sport court, and I would be curious to know what the difference of 2 courts would be. So I still think it's an option to be pursued. I understood it might be pursued through engagement with the additional information. That's not covered within the motion that we have, but I would leave my comments for council to consider. Councillor O'Keefe, if you will, for a moment. Just I did actually want to respond to the one comment you made with regards to taking the lead with North Saanich and the Victoria Airport Authority. We're currently partners with North Saanich on Rotary Park, and I think it's reasonable for a partner to raise a topic. The Pickleball Association has gone into all the municipalities on the peninsula and Saanich as well. And I think it's reasonable. I appreciate where you're coming from, that it's in a different municipality, but it is a partnership. And we're partners with North Saanich on a lot of things, whether it's RCMP, whether it's Panorama Recreation, whether it's library. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to pursue a discussion on a possible opportunity going forward. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So the other comment I just wanted to also make is that for me, this is also, when we look at all of the different priorities and the things that we're trying to accomplish in the next little while. So there's concern about getting the OCP done. We want to get an active transportation plan in place. There's a lot of things, and in our strategic planning, we had talked about the number of things that is on staff's plate, the number of things that we have that we want to get done prior to the end of our term. And so I guess a concern for me here is that we're tasking staff with, sending this back to them again when they've spent a significant amount of time on it already. And I have concerns about pulling them away to focus on something like this when we've got other things. And that's why I think at least waiting for the information from on the pilot, or the information from the other jurisdictions, at least buys staff a little bit of time, so we can wait until that comes in, get all this other stuff done, and then maybe turn our attention to it. But in the scheme of our priorities, I'd like to be focusing on those other things, and I'm happy to let this go for a little while anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm fine with the motion that's on the table. I did want to raise one point since we've started discussing Tallista Park as a potential location for the pickleball courts. One of the concerns I would have about Tallista Park is that we haven't actually worked through the sea level rise mapping and what it means for Tallista Park, and whether it makes sense to be developing additional capital facilities, in Tallista Park until we sort out how we're going to deal with adaptation to sea level rise. Because, pickleball courts are one thing, swimming pools another. It would be good to have planned what it's going to be, and I think we should get our act together on that before we're building any significant capital assets in Tallista. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I might just comment, if I will, is that I can certainly appreciate that for long-term infrastructure, but I don't know that an outdoor pickleball court would be expected to have a life necessarily, as long as we're considering sea level rise, for the next 30 to 50 years. But I take your point. Thank you. Councillor, I think was Councillor Barnett next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess the point I'd raise about not pushing something forward with this is that even before we were elected, I sat in chairs out there listening to the presentation of the Pickleball Association to the previous council. So this is something that's been going on for a long time, and I certainly would like to see some kind of resolution if we can manage to get there. So I think at least putting this forward puts us in a direction that's new and has potential. So I'm more, like I said before, I'm more than happy to support the motion put forward by Councillor Renewal. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? We have two opposed, Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Fallot. The motion carries. Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, continue on with the second motion that the Town of Sidney Peninsula Recreation Commissioners request that the Commission consider the possibility of creating pickleball courts within its strategic plan review process.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please, Councillor?
That the Town of Sidney Peninsula Recreation Commissioners be requested to ask the Commission consider the possibility of creating pickleball courts within its strategic plan review process.
Second.
Councillor O'Toole?
So happy if we feel that it may not be necessary to make that reference. It's in keeping with the recommendation number 2 in the staff report around raising this at the commission table is the intent. As noted, December 2nd is the next strategic planning meeting. I think there's an opportunity there for myself as a commissioner to make a reference to this discussion at Sidney Council and the possible interest that the town would have in seeing the Recreation Commission closely examine the prospect of additional pickleball courts at PRC facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? I'll just comment that as the other commissioner actually appointed from the CRD as your CRD representative, is that as Councillor O'Toole has indicated, the Commission is in the midst of its 5-year strategic plan, and we have had discussion. We have had letters from the Pickleball Association at the Commission level, and I think we're actively considering it. And until we go into the next stage of our meetings, it's really uncertain. I'll just comment that we build tennis courts. We have built tennis courts for residents in Sidney. We have them in at least 2 locations. And Panorama has tennis courts at Panorama. I don't think it's a case of either or, pickleball courts in Sidney or at Panorama Recreation. I think it should be, given the level of interest in pickleball in the association, that all avenues should be pursued, and I'll certainly continue to do that at the commission table. Councillor Garnett.
I think I don't know if there's been a secondary yet, so I was just going to second.
Yeah, there was.
Was there? Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. So we're now going to section 14, correspondence, and the first is item 14A, which is a letter with regards to complaints regarding Halloween fireworks from Mr. Talbot and also from L. Rojas. And the dates are there, and we have a recommendation from staff.
I'll move that we refer to staff for a report on options.
Second.
Discussion, I'll turn to the mover and seconder first.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is a tough one, because I actually would like to see them banned myself, and the petition that's mentioned in one of the letters I actually support. The difficulty is around enforcement, and how can the police be everywhere on one night? And right now they have, I believe it requires a permit to set them off, and fireworks are illegal, but they still manage to make it out. And in my particular neighborhood, it was quite bad this year and I'm pretty sure not everybody had permits. And actually, when I went to pull the mail out of the box the day after, there was a half-lit firecracker in there, and thankfully there was no mail in there. There was actually a burn mark in the plastic of the outgoing mail compartment. So there's a real danger. We're often warned that to be aware when we open boxes after Halloween, to be careful because of pipe bombs and things like that, and it has happened. There's been injuries before. But as far as fireworks goes, and I had a dog myself who was absolutely terrified, would shake uncontrollably, and I've heard of others who've had the same issues. So I would like to see, we're referring it to staff, but I would like to see something done personally myself, because I think it's something that this can be quite disruptive on not just animals, but people as well. And as the letter's written here, to an area like Roberts Bay, which is pretty special. So that's something I hope we can do something about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fallon? No? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. The only thing I was going to add is, this just refers to Roberts Bay Bird Sanctuary. But I'm sure we have other environmentally sensitive areas within Sidney. And so I guess what I was wondering is, would staff, when they're doing their report, be just looking at Roberts Bay, or would this be sort of looking at Sidney as a whole in terms of our environmentally sensitive areas, that we would have a policy for fireworks around Ray Creek or wherever those other areas are as well?
I'll turn to Mr.
If I
Allen.
can, through the Mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, yeah, it's a good question in terms of what approach we would take. It's, as noted in my response to Mr. Talbot, it's covered under a bylaw. So from our perspective, I think
Okay.
we're looking at the totality of the bylaw, and should we be reconsidering it completely in terms of our approach? And so I don't want to
Okay.
prejudge, what options we'll bring forward, but hearing Councillor Garnett's comments as well, yeah, I think there's certainly probably a few folks that have concerns out there about fireworks in general.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Landry.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing that's different about the Roberts Bay area is the fact that it's migratory bird sanctuary, and that gives the possibility that Canadian Wildlife Service might do some enforcement. Yes, it's very difficult to get them to show up to do enforcement, but given enough advance notice, the fact that we've been getting complaints, and that if they just show up this one night, they might make a real difference, that might be an option. So I'd encourage staff to look into the possibility of doing something specific for Roberts Bay and not necessarily the entire town.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Chief Mickelson. Good evening.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would just add in respect to enforcement that the fire department does endeavor to do our best to try to enforce the fireworks permits that we do provide. We do have the power to enforce infractions for those who are lighting fireworks off without a permit. We share those permits with the RCMP. But again, in reality, if we really wanted to enforce fireworks use in the town, you would have to fund some bylaw folks for that night specifically, because in reality, and as Councillor Garnett it's alluded to, fireworks complaints are perhaps the lowest acuity call we can go to. When any other call comes in, that's going to fall to the bottom of the pile. So if we really want to enforce fireworks infractions, it's going to require staffing some bylaw staff during that night. And then I think you could successfully or realistically enforce infractions of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, so, sorry, have we made the motion? We have any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll turn to item 14B, a request to join a CRD Arts and Culture Support Service. We have a letter from the CRD dated November 9th. I might just make a brief comment before we go to the recommendation, and that is council will recall that that I provided an update from 2 CRD meetings, how the CRD had approached this through the commission, and separately there was a separate facilities committee as well, but specifically through the commission. So this we have considered this in the past, and we do have a recommendation before us. Councillor
If I
Fallon?
may, thank you. I'll move the recommendation that the CRD be advised that Sidney Council will not reconsider its participation in the arts and cultural support services.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Councillor Fallon?
Just a brief note, and also to a letter of thanks to Chair Plant for his letter and sending this report forward. This conversation, as the mayor has mentioned, has been brought forward a number of times, and we've not heard back from the arts councils, the arts groups, artists, the community at large, that this is something they want. So I think the community is comfortable where we are right now. We're supporting our Community Arts Council to the extent that they have funds available to give out grants, and I think joining the CRD Arts is not something that is
something that Sidney's interested in at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The seconder, sorry, the seconder was with you? You're good? Councillor O'Keefe, and then I'd like to speak.
Yeah, I will support this motion. I went back and pulled up the presentation that we got from from Artsy, and I think it was November of last year. And they gave a presentation on what they were doing, and they provided their perspective on the CRD Arts and Culture Support Service Program. And it's they weren't in favor of us becoming a full member, and that's where they recommended the voluntary contribution. The only ones I hear coming to council, over and over again about this is the CRD. Or as Councillor Fallett says, our local community Artsy appears happy with what we're currently doing. There's no large clamor from them to do something different. So I'm happy to carry on with our grant funding program with our local Artsy and keep our money here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I won't support this motion. I've long supported both advocating and supporting support for our local community arts through the Arts Commission and otherwise, but also contributing to, as we did for some 8 years, to the 8 or 9 years to the CRD service. And I will note that just as we provide municipal parks and we provide a very significant investment in municipal parks to our residents, the residents also support in a very significant way the Capital Regional District parks. And I think arts is analogous to that, and that sitting at the CRD board and appreciating the work of the commission, that we have a region-wide arts ecosystem that our residents, I believe, for those I've spoken with, would support this. I appreciate where council, we've deliberated in the past. I wasn't expecting to change minds this evening, but I want to go on record in terms of my ongoing support for that. And lastly, I would just ask, I would propose an amendment, and the amendment is just the addition of, it's currently worded that the CRD be advised that Sidney Council will not reconsider its participation in the Arts and Cultural Support Service in 2022. I don't know, there's no timeline on this. Is this saying that Sidney Council will not ever again consider supporting the CRD Arts? I'll turn to Councillor Fallett first and then Councillor Wainwright.
I'll let Councillor Wainwright speak I'll let Councillor Wainwright speak because he hasn't spoken to this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wainwright.
Actually, I'll wait and see if you've got a seconder before I speak.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you. I don't think that the amendment actually is functional in that we can't fetter the decision-making of a future council anyway. But what it will do is it will invite CRD to send us another letter next year. And every year after, if we say that the decision is only good for 1 year. So I'm not going to support that amendment. I think that the motion is clear as is and does not invite CRD to immediately send us another letter.
I appreciate the seconder seconded it likely for discussion, and I'll withdraw the amendment. Okay, so we have it on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Councillor O'Keefe?
Sorry, if I may, I'm just wanting to clarify. So there was an amendment that was moved and seconded. Sorry, did you withdraw?
I did.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm all right.
No, we're good. Thank you for the question. Again, all in favor? Opposed? One opposed? Myself. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to item 14C, which is request for funding increase from the Film and Media Commission.
Move the recommendation that it be referred to budget deliberations.
Second.
Discussion? Call question, Councillor Wainwright.
Sorry, Mayor, I think it's just worth commenting that we did receive a letter today from the Film Commission, and they're pointing out that there been some inaccuracies in the recent media reports in black press, that it isn't actually 10 times the request that they previously made. They've been making the same request year after year, and a few other things. So I think it's just worthwhile noting that well, we're going to refer it to budget, but don't believe everything you read in the media. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Councillor Wainwright, and I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Won't say much. I'll just speak to what they mentioned in the letter a little bit, just that in reference to the MAID series, and as a person who lives in the community, I was like, and we've just gone through the Beacon Wharf, and I watched the series, and there I'm watching me go, there's the Beacon Wharf, and I'm thinking how great that is, and how great it was for our community to have that highlighted. And I mean, I don't think we can underestimate the value that they bring to our community. It's just something I wanted to put on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I support the motion. What I would like to know more, though, from the Film Commission when this comes forward to budget is it would be nice to have a little bit more information from them in terms of, can they tell us how many movies were filmed here? Do they? I know they say it's hard to come up with an amount, but it would help, I think, explain to the community the value that the film industry brings. I mean, I know that the film industry was one of the industries that made a real concerted effort to put safe COVID measures in place so they could get up and running. And I know a lot of our local businesses, just anecdotally, got a bit of a lifeline because the film industry was able to start filming, and that helped. So getting a bit more from them, I think, would be helpful in sort of building their case to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to 15, which is correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. And we'll turn to Councillor Wainwright and his notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a notice of motion, and I guess I'll just start off with the whereas. Whereas the recent atmospheric river rainfall event resulted in a lot of flooding, several significant slope failures, road closures, washouts, and other damage in many communities throughout BC. This raises concern about how well Sidney's infrastructure handled this event, how much impact this event had on our community, and how often we'll be seeing events like this in the future years. So the proposed motion is that staff be requested to provide a report to Council before our 2022 budget sessions, which considers the following matters. How much of our storm drainage system was over capacity and how badly? How much of our infrastructure was close to capacity? How did our pump stations handle the event? How much flooding did we experience? Should we consider giving higher priority to some infrastructure projects? Does staff have any recommendations or additional information Council should be aware of arising from this event? So thank you, Mayor. I'd be proposing to bring this forward at the next meeting.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor, for reading it into our record this evening, and it will be on the next Council agenda. We'll turn to sections. No questions.
Oh, okay.
We do have. Do you have a question of staff?
Well, no, I was going to ask a question about process.
Please do.
In terms of.
Can you turn your mic on? Thank you.
Yeah, just a question about process. Whether does Council have the option to consider this now?
If it's considered in our Council Procedures Bylaw, which I did check earlier today, if Council considers it an urgent item, we can take a vote and decide to consider it this evening. And I did not propose to do that, but I will leave it with you.
I would propose to deal with it tonight. Is that a motion or? I need some guidance here on.
It needs to be a motion that we would consider it due to an urgent basis. I quite frankly, I
Okay.
will give a comment that I don't believe it's an urgent item.
Okay, okay, I'll leave it at that then.
Thank you. But thank you for raising that. And we'll turn to a motion to go on camera.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters, personal information pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. A motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
move.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
Good evening.